"Mom, why is Santa crying?" That's what my 8-year-old asked me in the middle of a crowded Christmas fair. Because the volunteer in the red suit wasn't some retired postal worker. It was Christopher James, billionaire, my ex, the father Jeff had been asking about since he learned other kids had dads. And 30 seconds ago, when Jeff climbed onto his lap and said his name, Christopher realized what I'd kept from him for 8 years. That those gray eyes staring up at him, they were his. That the child asking for nothing but for my mom to smile more, his son. And now 200 people with cameras were watching a secret I'd buried explode in real time. Christmas has a way of exposing the past. People think it's the lights or the music or the forced cheer that does it, but it's really the memories. They slip through the cracks when you least expect them. When you're wrapping a secondhand toy in dollar store paper. When you're smiling at your son while calculating if you can afford both the electric bill and his class gift exchange. When you're pretending everything is fine. That's what Christmas had become for me. A performance. A beautiful, exhausting lie I told myself I was winning at. I wasn't, but Jeff didn't need to know that. "Mom, can we go early?" Jeff stood in the doorway of our tiny kitchen, already bundled in the navy blue winter coat I'd found at Goodwill 3 weeks earlier. The toggles were slightly loose. The sleeves hung past his wrists. He'd grow into it. That's what I told myself about everything. I glanced at the clock above the sink, the one that was 10 minutes fast because I'd never fixed it. 4:15. The community Christmas fair didn't officially start until 5, but Jeff had been talking about it for 2 weeks straight. Not because of the games, not because of the cookies shaped like reindeer, because of Santa. "You really want to beat the crowds, huh?" I asked, drying my hands on a dish towel worn thin from years of use. He nodded solemnly, his gray eyes serious in that way that always made him seem older than 8. "I want enough time. I have a lot to say." Something in my chest tightened. Jeff wasn't like other 8-year-olds. He didn't ask for video games or expensive sneakers or the things his classmates whispered about in the lunch line. Last year, he'd asked Santa for a warm winter for Mom. The volunteer Santa, some retired postal worker with kind eyes, had looked at me with such pity I'd nearly walked out. This year, Jeff had been writing his letter for days, folding it, unfolding it, carrying it in his coat pocket like a talisman. "All right," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "Early it is." His face lit up. That smile, God, that smile. It was the only thing in my life I'd gotten completely right. The town square was already transforming when we arrived. White string lights crisscrossed above the cobblestone walkway like a canopy of stars. Vendors were setting up wooden stalls, the smell of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts drifting through the cold air. A giant Christmas tree stood in the center, 20 feet tall, ornaments glittering red and gold under the early winter dusk. Snow had started falling, soft, lazy flakes that melted the second they touched the ground. Jeff's mittened hand slipped into mine. "It's perfect," he whispered, his breath visible in the air. I wanted to agree. I wanted to feel the magic he felt, but all I could see were the things we couldn't afford. The families in matching coats, red plaid, coordinated, expensive. The fathers lifting children onto their shoulders, their laughter easy and unburdened. The mothers who weren't doing mental math about whether they could splurge on a $5 hot chocolate without shorting next week's groceries. Maybe you know what that feels like. When you're standing in the middle of something beautiful and all you can think about is survival. If you've ever been there, if you've ever smiled through fear, you already understand why I almost turned around. But I didn't, because Jeff deserved this. And if you're still watching, maybe you understand that too. Maybe you know what it's like to give everything for someone who doesn't even know how much you're sacrificing. If you do, if this story is hitting close to home, subscribe, because this is just the beginning, and you're going to want to see how this ends. We joined the line snaking toward the oversized red chair at the square center. Santa's throne. Even from a distance, I could see it was elaborate this year. Gold trim, deep crimson velvet cushions, a hand-painted backdrop of a snowy village that looked like it belonged in a department store window. Someone had money. Someone always did. Jeff bounced on his toes, clutching his folded letter in both hands. The edges were worn soft from being carried everywhere for 3 days. "Mom," he said, tugging my sleeve gently, "do you think Santa will like my letter?" I looked down at him. His cheeks were pink from the cold. His curls, dark and wild, impossible to tame, peeked out from under his knit cap. "I think he'll love it," I told him. "You've been very specific this year." Jeff nodded seriously. "I don't want toys. I just want Santa to know I'm grateful." The tightness in my chest became a fist. That was my boy, 8 years old, gentle, observant, too wise for the childhood he should have had. "Grateful for what?" I asked softly, even though part of me didn't want to know. He looked up at me with those impossible gray eyes that didn't come from me, and said, "For you." I blinked hard against the sting behind my eyes. "Not here. Not now." "You're going to make Santa cry," I whispered. "Good," Jeff said matter-of-factly. "Then he'll know I mean it." The line moved slowly. Around us, children bounced with sugar-fueled energy, their voices rising in excited squeals. Parents snapped photos on phones, their faces glowing in the screen light. Christmas music played softly through overhead speakers, something instrumental and safe, the kind that made you forget the world had sharp edges. I let myself breathe. This was fine. This was normal. 1 hour, maybe 2. Then we'd go home, make spaghetti with jarred sauce, and watch a holiday movie on our ancient laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up. Simple, manageable, safe. But then Jeff stiffened beside me. I felt it before I saw it, the way his hand tightened around mine, the way his body went still in that particular way that meant his mind was working on something. "Mom," he whispered, leaning closer. His voice dropped, uncertain. "Santa looks familiar." My stomach dropped. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "Santa looks like a lot of people." But my voice sounded strange even to me. Thin, distant, because I was staring now too. Santa was 3 children away, close enough now that I could see him in full detail. The red suit was pristine, not the cheap polyester kind most community volunteers wore. This was tailored, professional, the kind of fabric that didn't wrinkle. The beard was real, or expensive enough to look real. Thick, white, perfectly trimmed. But it was his posture that caught my attention first. He sat perfectly still. Not the jolly shifting of a volunteer trying to stay in character. Not the slight slouch of someone tired from sitting too long. This was control, precision, the kind of stillness that came from boardrooms and power. And then I saw his eyes, steel gray, sharp, even from 15 feet away, searching. My breath caught in my throat. No, it couldn't be. The line moved forward. 2 children now. A little girl in a pink coat climbed onto Santa's lap, chattering about a dollhouse with 3 stories and real lights. Santa listened, nodded, smiled beneath the beard. But something was wrong. I knew those hands. I knew the way they moved. Controlled, deliberate, never wasted motion. The way they gestured when he was thinking. The way they'd once held my face like I was something precious, right before he told me he was leaving. That his company needed him. That timing was everything. That he was sorry. I never got the chance to tell him why I'd begged him to stay. I never got to say the words, "I'm pregnant." "Mom?" Jeff's voice pulled me back to the present. "You're squeezing my hand too tight." I loosened my grip immediately, my palms sweating despite the cold. "Sorry, baby." "Next," Santa called. His voice, oh God, deep, steady, the kind of voice that commanded rooms full of executives and venture capitalists. The kind of voice I hadn't heard in 9 years, but would recognize anywhere. Christopher James, Billionaire CEO. The man who'd built James Core Security, the software that protected hospital systems and banking networks across 40 countries. The man whose face appeared in Forbes and TechCrunch beside headlines about revolutionizing cybersecurity and youngest self-made billionaire in the sector. The man who'd kissed me goodbye in an airport terminal and never looked back. The father Jeff asked about every few months in careful, quiet voices, like he was afraid the question itself might hurt me. And now he was sitting on a velvet throne in the middle of a town square, dressed as Santa Claus, in a place Christopher James had absolutely no reason to be. Unless he'd come looking. Unless he knew. But he couldn't. He couldn't know. Could he? Next, Santa repeated, gentler this time, patient. Jeff looked up at me, his eyes bright with hope. Can I go? My mouth was dry. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I thought I might be sick. I should have said no. I should have grabbed Jeff's hand and walked away. I should have protected us both from whatever was about to happen. But he was already moving forward, hope written across his face in a way I couldn't destroy. So I let him go. I watched my 8-year-old son walk toward the man who didn't know he existed. And I watched Christopher James freeze the second Jeff came into view. Now pay close attention to what happens next. Because this moment, this is where 9 years of secrets collide with 30 seconds of truth. And if you've ever kept something from someone because you thought it would protect them, you know exactly how this feels. The fear, the panic, the certainty that everything is about to shatter. Hit the like button if you're feeling this, because what happens next is going to leave you speechless. It happens slowly, like watching glass crack in real time. Santa's hands, which had been resting calmly on the armrest, twitched, just once, barely noticeable. His shoulders went rigid beneath the red velvet. His head tilted, just slightly, as though he were trying to make sense of something impossible. Jeff climbed onto his lap without hesitation, settling in with the easy trust of a child who still believed the world was good, who still believed adults told the truth, who still believed his mother when she said everything was fine. "Hi, Santa," Jeff said brightly, his letter clutched in both hands. "I wrote you something." Santa didn't respond right away. He was staring, not at Jeff's face, at his hands first, small, 8 years old. The shape of them, long fingers, broad palms, then his profile, the slope of his nose, the set of his jaw. Then, finally, his eyes, those unmistakable gray eyes. I saw the exact moment recognition hit. Santa's breath hitched, his chest rose sharply beneath the red suit like he'd been punched. His gloved hands gripped the armrests. His eyes, those sharp steel gray eyes, went wide. Then they snapped to mine. And the world collapsed. Christopher James, Ruth Daniel, and between us, the 8-year-old boy who had his father's eyes, his jawline, his hands, the son he never knew existed. Jeff tilted his head, studying Santa with that careful way he studied everything. The way he studied textbooks and soccer plays and the faces of adults when they thought he wasn't paying attention. "Are you okay, Santa?" Jeff asked softly. "You look sad." Christopher's voice came out hoarse, broken. What's your name?" "Jeff," my son said proudly. "Jeff Daniel. I'm 8. The name hit like a bullet. Christopher's grip tightened on the armrest. I could see his knuckles whiten even through the gloves. "Jeff Daniel," he repeated slowly, like he was trying the words out, testing them. "How old are you?" 8, Jeff said again. "I'm in 3rd grade. I like science and soccer and reading about space." 8 years. Christopher's gaze dropped to Jeff's hands again. His face, the shape of his ears, the cowlick at his hairline. Everything he'd missed, everything I'd kept from him. "Santa?" Jeff asked, his voice uncertain now. "You're shaking." And he was. Santa Claus, Christopher James, billionaire, CEO, the man who'd once negotiated a $400 million acquisition without flinching, was trembling. His hands, his shoulders, his voice. "Sometimes," he said unsteadily, "Santa gets emotional." But his eyes never left Jeff's face. He was cataloging, memorizing, trying to catch up on 8 years and 30 seconds. Trying to understand how this was possible. The photographer, a teenager with a cheap camera, shifted awkwardly. Everything okay? Should I take the picture?" "Yes," Christopher said too quickly. "Yes, just give me a minute." I stepped forward, panic overriding paralysis. My legs felt weak. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "That's enough," I said. "We'll take a picture and go." Christopher shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, please, just one more minute." He leaned closer to Jeff, his hands hovering near him, but never quite touching, like he was afraid Jeff might disappear if he moved wrong. Like he was afraid this was a dream. "Jeff," he said gently, his voice cracking around the edges. What do you want for Christmas? Jeff thought for a moment, his face serious, his brow furrowed the way it did when he was choosing his words carefully. I want my mom to smile more, he said finally. The fist in my chest became a knife. The teenager photographer made a small sound, something between awe and a sniffle, but Christopher wasn't finished. And, Jeff added quietly, looking down at his folded letter, I want to know who my dad is. Time stopped. This is the moment every secret keeper dreads, when the truth stops being yours to control. When the person you've been protecting asks the one question you can't answer without breaking everything open. And if you've ever been caught between protecting someone and telling the truth, you know this feeling. You know this fear. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have told him sooner, or would you have done exactly what I did? Because I need to know I'm not the only one who thought silence was mercy. The noise of the fair faded into static. The music, the laughter, the vendors calling out their specials. All of it disappeared. The world shrank down to the three of us, Ruth, Christopher, and the truth we could no longer avoid. Christopher went pale beneath the beard. His jaw worked like he was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. His hands trembled openly now. And then he stood. Santa Claus stood up, towering and shaking, in the middle of a town square full of families and children and Christmas music. Parents turned. Children stared. The teenage photographer took a step back. I think, Christopher said hoarsely, his eyes locked on mine, that's something we need to talk about. His voice wasn't angry. It was devastated. Jeff looked between us, confusion flickering across his face. Mom, do you know Santa? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. My hands were shaking. Christopher's eyes, those gray eyes Jeff had inherited, bore into mine. And in them, I saw everything. Shock, recognition, betrayal, and something else. Something that looked like grief. Ruth, he said quietly. Just my name. But the way he said it, like a prayer, like an accusation, like a wound. The teenager cleared her throat. Should I get someone? No, Christopher said, his voice steadier now, controlled. The CEO was coming back. We're fine. We just need a moment. Privately. He gestured toward a door behind the stage, some kind of back room or office. I should have refused. I should have grabbed Jeff and run. But running was what got us here. And maybe, God help me, maybe it was time to stop. Jeff, I said quietly, crouching to his level. Stay here with... I looked around. The teenage photographer was useless. A vendor nearby, a woman in her 50s selling handmade ornaments, caught my eye. I'll watch him, she said gently. Take your time, honey. Jeff's hand tightened around mine. Mom, what's happening? Nothing bad, I lied. Santa just wants to talk to me about something. I'll be right back. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded. I followed Christopher through the door. The back room was small, cinder block walls painted beige, a folding table, 2 plastic chairs, a space heater humming in the corner. Christopher closed the door behind us, and for the first time in 9 years, we were alone. He pulled off the Santa hat, then the beard. His face was exactly as I remembered. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, those impossible eyes, but older now, harder. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said the 4 words I'd been dreading for 8 years. That's my son, isn't it? It wasn't a question. The drive home felt like moving through water. Everything slow, everything muffled, everything wrong. I'd left Christopher standing in that back room, his face wrecked, his Santa suit suddenly obscene against the weight of what he'd just learned. I'd walked out before he could ask more questions, before he could demand rights I wasn't ready to negotiate, before I completely fell apart. Jeff sat in the back seat of our 12-year-old Honda, unusually quiet, clutching the letter he never got to give Santa. Mom, his voice was small. Why did Santa leave? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had an emergency, baby. Did I do something wrong? The question cracked me open. No, God, no. You were perfect. Then why did he look so sad? Because he just found out he has a son. Because 8 years of his child's life flashed before his eyes in 30 seconds. Because I kept you from him and he from you, and there's no universe where that conversation doesn't end in devastation. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings, I said weakly. Jeff was quiet for a moment. Then, did you know him before he was Santa? My throat closed. Yeah, sweetheart. I knew him a long time ago. Were you friends? Something like that. Is that why he was crying? I glanced in the rearview mirror. Jeff was studying me with those impossible gray eyes, Christopher's eyes, trying to solve a puzzle I'd spent 8 years hiding. We should talk about this at home, I said, but I knew that conversation was coming faster than I was ready for. Because my phone had been buzzing in my purse since we left the fair. 7 missed calls, all from the same number I hadn't deleted in 9 years, all from Christopher James. That night, after Jeff finally fell asleep, clutching his undelivered letter to Santa, I sat at our kitchen table with my phone in my hands. Christopher's number was still in my contacts, saved under CJ like that somehow made it less real. Like abbreviating his name could abbreviate the history between us. My thumb hovered over the delete button, over the call button, over the message icon. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for not destroying me in front of our son today. Sorry for the 8 years of lies. Please don't take him from me. The last one was the truth I couldn't say out loud. The fear that lived in my bones. Because Christopher James was a man who got what he wanted, who built empires and crushed competitors and never, ever lost. And now he wanted his son. What chance did a single mother with a nursing degree and $840 in her checking account have against that? Here's what nobody tells you about keeping secrets. They don't just hide the truth, they hide you. For 8 years, I'd been living half a life, always looking over my shoulder, always one Google search away from discovery. And now I had less than a day to figure out how to live in the light. If you've ever had to face something you've been running from, you know this feeling, that mix of terror and relief. Subscribe if you want to see how this impossible conversation goes, because tomorrow night, everything changes. The next day crawled by like torture. I called in sick to work. Something I never did because we couldn't afford it. But I couldn't focus, couldn't pretend, couldn't stand in a hospital hallway drawing blood and making small talk when my entire world was about to implode. Jeff went to school like normal. I packed his lunch, walked him to the bus stop, kissed his forehead. Are you okay, Mom? He asked, his backpack pulling his shoulders down. You seem sad. Just tired, baby. He studied me with that too old wisdom. Is it about Santa? Everything was about Santa. We'll talk when you get home, I said. I promise. The hours between dropping Jeff at the bus and picking him up felt both infinite and impossibly short. I cleaned the apartment, not because it was dirty, but because I needed to move, to do something. To prepare for Christopher James to walk into our tiny 2-bedroom and see exactly how we've been living. The couch I'd bought secondhand on Facebook Marketplace. The TV from 2014 that only worked if you hit it at the right angle. The kitchen table that wobbled unless you folded a napkin under one leg. This was Jeff's whole world, and tomorrow it would be measured against private jets and penthouses and everything money could buy. At 3:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. CJ, I'll be there at 7. Don't make me use lawyers. My hands shook as I typed back. Me, will be here. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. CJ, does he like pizza? The question broke something in me. Because that's what a father would ask. What a man who wanted to know his son would think about. Me, pepperoni, extra cheese, no vegetables. CJ, noted. That was it. No other messages. Just a man trying to figure out how to meet his 8-year-old son for the first time while pretending it was normal. Comment below and tell me, is it crazy that one text about pizza made me cry? That after 8 years of doing this alone, the idea of someone else knowing Jeff's favorite toppings felt like both a gift and a loss? Because I'm about to share my son with a man who has every right to hate me. Jeff came home at 4:15, dropped his backpack by the door, and immediately knew something was wrong. Mom? I was sitting on the couch, my hands clasped between my knees, trying to figure out how to start. Come sit with me, baby. He climbed onto the couch, his small body tucking against mine. He smelled like school, pencil shavings and cafeteria pizza, and innocence. Am I in trouble? He asked quietly. No. God, no. I pulled him closer. But I need to tell you something important. About yesterday. About Santa. His body tensed. What about him? This was it. The moment everything changed. His name is Christopher, I said softly, and he's not really Santa. He was just volunteering. But I knew him a long time ago. Jeff pulled back to look at me, his gray eyes searching. How did you know him? We were together before you were born. I watched his mind work, watched him do the math that 8-year-olds shouldn't have to do. Was he? Jeff's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Was he my dad? The question hung in the air between us. I could have lied, could have said no, could have protected us both for a little longer. But Christopher would be here in 2 hours and 43 minutes, and Jeff deserved the truth from me first. Yes, I whispered. He's your father. Jeff went completely still. For real? His voice was so small. For real? Santa is my dad? Christopher is your dad. He was just dressed as Santa yesterday. Does he know about me? This was the hard part, the part where I had to admit what I'd done. He didn't, I said carefully. Not until yesterday. When he saw you, when he saw your face, he knew. Jeff's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't he know before? Because I didn't tell him. The words tasted like ash. When I found out I was pregnant, he was far away, and I was scared. So I decided not to tell him, and that was wrong. That was my choice, and it wasn't fair to either of you. He didn't want me? The break in Jeff's voice shattered me. He didn't know about you, baby. That's different. If he'd known, my own tears started falling. If he'd known, everything would have been different. Jeff was quiet for a long moment. Then, is he coming here? Yes, tonight, at 7. He wants to meet you, properly. What if he doesn't like me? I pulled him into my arms, holding him so tight. That's impossible. You're the best thing in the world. But Jeff was shaking, and I was crying, and the clock kept ticking toward 7, toward the moment when Christopher James would walk through our door, and our family of 2 would become something else entirely. At 6:52 p.m., Jeff changed his shirt for the 3rd time. Does this look okay? He asked, standing in his doorway, wearing his navy button-up, the one we'd bought for school pictures last fall. My heart cracked. You look perfect. Baby, what if he thinks I'm weird? You're not weird. What if I say something stupid? You won't. What if... The doorbell rang. We both froze. Jeff's face went pale. My stomach dropped to my feet. 7 p.m. exactly. Of course, Christopher would be exactly on time. Billionaire CEOs didn't do fashionably late. Mom? Jeff's voice trembled. I don't know if I can do this. I crouched in front of him, taking his shaking hands in mine. You don't have to do anything except be yourself. If it's too much, if you want him to leave, you just look at me and I'll make it stop. Okay? He nodded, but he looked terrified. I wanted to tell him it would be fine, that everything would be okay. But I didn't know that. I didn't know anything anymore. The doorbell rang again. I stood smoothing my jeans, my nicest pair, which wasn't saying much, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I could see him. Christopher James stood in my apartment hallway, wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater. No suit, no tie, like he was trying to look approachable, normal. But there was nothing normal about this. I opened the door. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He looked different without the Santa costume. Younger somehow, more like the man I'd loved and less like the billionaire stranger from magazine covers. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were red-rimmed. He'd been crying. Hi, he said quietly. Hi. Behind me, I heard Jeff's small intake of breath. Christopher's gaze shifted past me, landing on our son. His son. And I watched his entire face transform, every hard edge softening, every wall crumbling. Jeff, he breathed. Jeff took a tiny step forward, then stopped. His hand found mine and squeezed tight. Hi, Jeff whispered. Christopher's eyes filled. Hi, buddy. The word buddy nearly destroyed me, because it was so normal, so dad-like, so everything Jeff had never had. "Do you want to come in?" I asked, my voice unsteady. Christopher nodded, not taking his eyes off Jeff. He stepped inside our small apartment, and I watched him take it in. The cramped space, the worn furniture, the life we'd built without him. If he judged, he didn't show it. "I brought pizza," he said, holding up a bag I hadn't noticed. "Pepperoni, extra cheese. I heard that's your favorite." Jeff's eyes widened. "How did you know?" Christopher glanced at me, then back to Jeff. "Your mom told me." "You talked to my mom?" "We've been talking," I said gently, "about how to do this, how to help you understand." Jeff looked between us, processing. "Are you really my dad?" Christopher crouched down, putting himself at Jeff's eye level. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Same eyes, same nose, same serious expression when they were thinking. "Yes," Christopher said, his voice thick with emotion. "I really am." "Where were you?" The question was so simple, so devastating. Christopher's face crumpled. "I didn't know about you. If I had known," his voice broke. "If I had known, I would have been here. For everything, I promise." We ate pizza at the wobbly kitchen table. Christopher sat across from Jeff, asking careful questions. "What's your favorite subject? Do you play any sports? What do you want to be when you grow up?" Jeff answered in quiet single sentences at first. Then gradually, as Christopher listened, really listened, he opened up. "I like science, especially space stuff." "Yeah? What about space? How big it is, how we're just small." Christopher smiled. "I think about that too sometimes." "Really? Really? When things get overwhelming, I look up at the sky and remember that my problems are small compared to the universe." Jeff considered this. "That's what Mom says." Christopher's eyes flicked to mine. Something passed between us. Recognition, maybe. Or grief for the parallel lives we'd been living. "Your mom is smart," Christopher said softly. "She works really hard," Jeff said, his voice suddenly protective. "She's a nurse. She helps people." "I know." Christopher's gaze held mine. "She's always been good at taking care of people." The weight of those words settled over the room. After dinner, Jeff showed Christopher his room, proudly pointing out his bookshelf, his soccer trophies, the solar system model we'd built together from a kit I'd found on clearance. I stood in the doorway, watching them, watching Christopher's face as Jeff explained each planet's distance from the sun, watching the way he nodded seriously when Jeff told him that Neptune was his favorite because it's misunderstood, watching my son glow under the attention of a father who'd just appeared like magic. At 8:30, Jeff started yawning. Christopher noticed immediately. "It's getting late," he said gently. "You should probably get ready for bed." Jeff nodded but hesitated. Will you come back?" Christopher's voice cracked. "If you want me to, I'll come back every day." "Every day? Every single day?" Jeff looked at me for confirmation. I managed a nod, even though panic was clawing at my chest. After Jeff brushed his teeth and climbed into bed, Christopher asked quietly, "Can I say goodnight?" I nodded. I stood outside Jeff's room, listening to Christopher's low voice, reading a chapter from the astronomy book on Jeff's nightstand, listening to Jeff's sleepy questions, listening to the sound of something I'd been telling myself we didn't need. A father. When Christopher emerged, pulling the door almost closed behind him, his eyes were wet, but he was smiling. "He gave me something," Christopher said quietly, holding up a folded piece of paper. My heart stopped. "What is that?" "His letter, the one he wrote for Santa." "Christopher, you don't have to." "He wanted me to read it." His voice cracked. "He said since I was Santa that day, I should know what was in it." He unfolded it carefully. His hands trembled as his eyes moved across Jeff's careful 8-year-old printing. Then he looked up at me, completely undone. "Ruth." He could barely speak. "He didn't ask for toys. He asked Santa to help him find his dad, and to make sure his dad would want him." The silence that followed felt sacred and devastating all at once. "He wanted me," Christopher whispered, "even before he knew who I was." He wanted me. I had no words, just tears streaming down my face as Christopher carefully folded the letter and placed it in his wallet, right where he'd carry it every single day, where he'd remember what he almost missed and what he'd never take for granted again. "Thank you," Christopher whispered after a long moment. "For what?" "For him. For raising him into that amazing kid. For," his voice broke, "for doing it alone when you shouldn't have had to." We stood in my tiny living room, the space suddenly feeling smaller with his presence filling it. "We need to talk about what happens now," I said quietly. "I want to be in his life, Ruth. Really in it. Not weekends or holidays. I want daily. I want real." "I know, but there have to be boundaries." His jaw tightened. "Like what?" "Like you don't get to fix everything with money. You don't get to swoop in with trips to Disneyland and private schools and make me look like the parent who couldn't provide." "That's not what I'm trying to do." "Then what are you trying to do?" My voice rose slightly. "Because that's my son in there. The one I raised. The one who's happy and healthy despite having nothing." "He doesn't have nothing," Christopher interrupted, his voice intense. "He has you, and that's everything." The words stopped me cold. "But he also deserves to have me," Christopher continued. "Not my money, not my name, me, and I—" His voice cracked. "I want to be his father, not an obligation or a checkbook. His dad." I wanted to argue, to protect our life from disruption, but I couldn't, because he was right. "Okay," I whispered, "but you don't disappear. You don't get to decide this is too hard or too complicated and walk away. If you're in, you're all in." "I'm in," he said immediately. "I'm not going anywhere." We stared at each other in my dimly lit living room, the weight of 8 years and one impossible future hanging between us. "I want to take him to soccer practice," Christopher said quietly, "and school events. And I want to be there when he has nightmares or needs help with homework or just wants someone to throw a ball with. That's—" I stopped, swallowed. "That's a lot of time." "I know. That's the point. And despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that our quiet life was about to become infinitely complicated," I nodded. Because Jeff deserved a father, and maybe Christopher deserved a second chance, even if it meant I had to share the son I'd been raising alone. "Tomorrow," Christopher said. "Can I pick him up from school?" Everything in me wanted to say no. Instead, I said, "I'll text you the address." 24 hours after Jeff learned the truth, Christopher arrived exactly at 7 p.m. This time, Jeff ran to the door before I could. "Dad!" The word still landed like an earthquake every time. Christopher scooped him up, both of them laughing, and I stood in the hallway watching the family I'd never thought we'd have become real. The first week was awkward in ways I hadn't anticipated. Christopher showed up at Jeff's school at 3:15 p.m. on Tuesday, standing by the pickup line in jeans and a jacket, looking like any other parent. Except he wasn't any other parent. He was Christopher James, and by Wednesday, every mother in the pickup line knew it. I got the text from another mom at 3:47 p.m. "Is that the Christopher James picking up your son?" Then another, "OMG, Ruth, why didn't you tell us?" And another, "Girl, details now." I didn't respond to any of them. What was I supposed to say? "Yes, that's my son's billionaire father who didn't know he existed until 5 days ago. No, we're not together. Yes, it's complicated." But Jeff didn't notice the stares or the whispers. When he climbed into Christopher's car, a Tesla that cost more than 3 years of my rent, he was beaming. "Mom, Dad took me for ice cream." "Dad." The word hit me like a physical blow. It had only been 5 days. 5 days, and already that word had slipped out naturally, like it had always belonged there. Christopher caught my expression from across the parking lot. His face flickered with something, guilt maybe, or triumph, or just the same shock I was feeling. That night, Jeff talked nonstop about their afternoon, how Christopher knew the owner of the ice cream shop, how they'd talked about black holes, how Christopher promised to take him to a planetarium on Saturday. "Is that okay, Mom?" Jeff asked, his eyes hopeful. "Can I go?" "Of course," I said, even though my chest felt tight. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For Jeff to have a father. for him to feel wanted. So why did it feel like I was losing him? By the second week, a rhythm emerged. Christopher had canceled 3 board meetings and rescheduled a trip to Singapore. I knew this because Jeff told me, pride obvious in his voice. Dad said I'm more important than work. The words should have made me happy. Instead, they made me angry. Where was this version of Christopher 9 years ago? Where was the man who put family first when I was standing in my apartment, terrified and alone, staring at a positive pregnancy test? But I couldn't say any of that to Jeff. So I smiled and said, "That's great, baby." Christopher tried to help financially. Of course he did. The second week, he mentioned setting up a trust for Jeff. I said no. The third week, he offered to pay off my student loans. I said no. By week 4, he stopped asking and started showing up with groceries. I bought too much, didn't want it to go to waste, and I let him because refusing felt like pride I couldn't afford. But I kept working my shifts, kept overtime when it was offered, kept paying our bills with my own paycheck. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed to know that if he left tomorrow, if this all fell apart, we'd still be okay. Because I'd built this life, me, and I wasn't ready to hand over the foundation just because someone with money showed up offering shortcuts. Christopher understood, or at least he stopped pushing. "I respect it," he'd said one evening when I declined his offer to cover Jeff's upcoming dental work. "You're protecting him." "I'm protecting us both," I'd corrected. Because money was easy, presence was what mattered. And so far, Christopher was showing up with both hands full of everything but his wallet. That's what was starting to change my mind. On Thursday, Christopher showed up for Jeff's soccer practice. I was already there, sitting on the bleachers with my thermos of coffee and my nurse's scrub still on from my shift. Christopher climbed up and sat 2 rows below me, leaving space between us like he understood the distance I needed. We watched Jeff run drills. He wasn't the best player on the team. Too gentle, too considerate, always passing when he should shoot. But he loved it. "He's good," Christopher said quietly. "He tries hard." Like his mom. I didn't respond. Didn't know how to. After practice, Jeff ran over, sweaty and grinning. "Did you see my assist?" "I saw," I said. "It was perfect." "Dad, did you see?" Christopher crouched down, eye level with Jeff. "I saw everything. You've got great field awareness. You know where everyone is before you pass." Jeff's face lit up. "Really? Really, that's a skill you can't teach." Watching them together, Christopher's hand on Jeff's shoulder, Jeff looking up at him like he hung the moon. Something in my chest both warmed and broke. You know what's hard about watching someone become the parent you needed them to be? You can't celebrate it without mourning what you didn't have. Every soccer practice Christopher attends is one I attended alone. Every homework session is a reminder of the nights I fell asleep at this table trying to figure out 3rd grade math after a 12-hour shift. Subscribe if you've ever had to smile through resentment, because this feeling, it gets more complicated before it gets better. The 3rd week, Jeff invited Christopher to his school's science fair. "You don't have to go," I told Christopher when he texted asking for details. "I'll be there." "I want to," he replied, "if that's okay." It wasn't about okay. It was about Jeff standing in front of his volcano project, looking toward the door every 30 seconds to see if his dad would show up. Christopher arrived 20 minutes early. He stood next to me in the crowded gym, both of us watching Jeff explain plate tectonics to a bored-looking judge. When the judge moved on, Jeff ran over to us. "How'd I do?" "You were amazing," I said. "Totally professional," Christopher added. "That judge didn't know what hit him." Jeff laughed. Then without thinking, he grabbed both our hands. "Come see Maya's project. It's about the solar system." And suddenly we were walking through the science fair, me, Christopher, and Jeff between us, holding both our hands, like a family. Several parents turned to stare. I felt their eyes, their judgment, their curiosity. But Jeff didn't notice. He was too busy pulling us toward the solar system display, chattering about orbital patterns. Christopher caught my eye over Jeff's head. His expression was complicated, happy and sad and terrified all at once. I understood completely. Comment below if you've ever found yourself in a moment you wanted and feared at the same time. Because standing in that gym, holding my son's hand while his father held the other, I realized we were building something I didn't know how to protect, and that terrified me. That night, after I'd put Jeff to bed, Christopher lingered at the door. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. We sat on my front steps, the concrete cold through my jeans, the November air biting. "I'm scared," Christopher said suddenly. "Of what?" "Of failing him." His voice was raw. "Every day I show up and I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know the right things to say. I don't know if I'm doing too much or not enough. I don't know how to be what he needs." "That's called parenting," I said softly. "I've felt that way every single day for 8 years." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the streetlight. "How do you do it?" "You just show up, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared." "I miss so much." His voice cracked. "I missed his first word, his first step, every birthday, every nightmare, every moment that made him who he is." "I know, and I'm angry about that." He turned to face me fully. "I'm angry at you for not telling me, and I'm angry at myself for leaving, and I'm angry that I can't get those years back. But I look at Jeff and He stopped, swallowing hard. "I can't be angry when I'm with him. I can only be grateful that I get right now." The honesty of it broke through my defenses. "He's getting attached to you," I said quietly. "Really attached." "Is that bad?" "It is if you leave." Christopher's face hardened. "I'm not leaving. People always say that." "I'm not people." His voice was fierce. "I'm his father, and I'm not going anywhere." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But I'd believed him once before. The moment that changed everything happened on a random Tuesday, 3 weeks into our new normal. I was running late from work, stuck in traffic, texting Christopher in a panic. "Can you get Jeff from school? I won't make it." "Already on my way," he replied. When I finally got home at 6:30, I found them at the kitchen table. Christopher was helping Jeff with math homework, their heads bent together over the workbook. "See, if you move this number here," Christopher was saying, "what happens to this side?" "It balances." Jeff's voice was excited. "Exactly. Math is just patterns. Once you see the pattern, it's easy." I stood in the doorway, unnoticed. And then Jeff said it, casual, natural, like it had always been true. "Thanks, Dad." Christopher froze, his pen hovered over the paper. "Yeah?" His voice was thick with emotion. "Anytime, buddy." Jeff went back to his homework, oblivious to the weight of what he'd just said. But Christopher's hand was shaking. He set down the pen carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter the moment. His eyes found mine across the room, and in them, I saw everything, joy and grief and fear and hope, all tangled together. Because Jeff had just called him Dad. Not accidentally, not tentatively, naturally, like it belonged. And I realized with sinking certainty that my son wasn't just getting attached. He was falling in love with the father he'd always wanted. And if Christopher left, if he decided this was too hard, too complicated, too much, it wouldn't just break Jeff's heart, it would destroy him. The fear I'd been pushing down for 3 weeks rose up, choking me. What had I done? What had I let happen? I'd opened the door to the one person who had the power to hurt my son more than anyone else in the world, and I had no idea how to protect him anymore. But not everyone was happy about Christopher's sudden presence. On Tuesday of the 4th week, Jeff's teacher pulled me aside after pickup. "Mrs. Daniel, I wanted to check in. Jeff mentioned his father is involved now. I just want to make sure this transition is healthy, that he's not being overwhelmed." The implication was clear. Is this billionaire using your son for PR? Is this real? "It's healthy," I said firmly. "Christopher is committed." She smiled tightly. "Of course, I just wanted to make sure." But her doubt lived in my chest for days. Because what if she was right? What if this was a phase for Christopher? A novelty that would wear off when fatherhood got boring? What if I'd let Jeff fall in love with someone temporary? You know what's strange about second chances? You spend all your time waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the person to prove they're still who they were, for the fairy tale to end. If you've ever let someone back in after they hurt you, you know this feeling. Subscribe if you want to see whether my fear was justified or whether Christopher really had changed. By the 5th week, Christopher had restructured his entire life around Jeff's schedule. He worked from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays so he could do pickup. He moved his morning meetings to accommodate breakfast with us twice a week. He turned down a speaking engagement in London because it conflicted with Jeff's soccer tournament. "Don't you have a company to run?" I asked one evening after he'd spent 3 hours helping Jeff build a model rocket. "I have a son to raise," he said simply. "The company will survive without me for a few hours a day. Jeff won't." One Saturday, Christopher took Jeff to the planetarium like he'd promised. They were gone for 5 hours. When they came back, Jeff was bursting with excitement. "Mom, we saw Saturn's rings, and they have this thing where you can feel how much you'd weigh on different planets. And Dad bought me this book about black holes." He ran to his room to put the book on his shelf, leaving Christopher and me standing in the doorway. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for today, for making him so happy." "Ruth," Christopher's voice was serious, "you don't have to thank me for spending time with my son. That's not a favor. That's my life now." Something in the way he said it, the certainty, the permanence, made my throat tight. "I'm trying to trust this," I admitted, "to trust you. But it's hard." "I know." He stepped closer. "I know I have to earn it every day, and I will, for as long as it takes." We stood there in my narrow hallway, Jeff's laughter drifting from his room, and for the first time, I let myself consider the possibility. That maybe Christopher really had changed. That maybe we really could make this work. That maybe, just maybe, we could be more than just co-parents navigating an impossible situation. The first month after the fair was chaos contained. Christopher hired security, discreet, invisible, but present. A photographer showed up at Jeff's school once, then never again. A blogger reached out for comment. Christopher's lawyers sent a cease and desist within hours. We'd managed to keep our family story private. But privacy, I was learning, was a luxury that expired. The article appeared on a tech gossip blog 5 weeks after Christopher first walked through our door. Not about the Christmas fair, about us, about the daily routine we thought was invisible. Billionaire CEO Christopher James has secret son. Below it, a photo. Christopher and Jeff leaving the ice cream shop, Christopher's hand on Jeff's shoulder, taken 3 days ago. Someone had been watching, waiting, building a story. My phone started buzzing at 6:47 a.m. Text after text, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Notifications that someone had found my Facebook, my Instagram, my LinkedIn. By 7:15, there were photographers outside our apartment building. "Mom?" Jeff stood in his doorway, still in his pajamas, his face confused. "Why are there people with cameras outside?" My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. "Get dressed, baby. We're leaving through the back." I called Christopher from my car, my voice sharp with panic. "Did you see it?" "I'm handling it." His voice was tight, controlled. CEO mode. "My PR team is working on a statement." "Your PR team?" I nearly shouted. "Christopher, there are photographers at my apartment, at Jeff's school. This isn't a corporate crisis you can spin. This is our son's life." "I know that." "Do you? Because this is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world doesn't fit with ours. It destroys it." Silence on the other end. Then, "Let me send security and a car. I can get you somewhere safe." "I don't want your security or your car," I said, tears burning my eyes. "I want my normal life back, the one where my son could walk to school without cameras in his face." "Ruth." I hung up. Jeff was crying in the back seat, not because of the photographers. He didn't fully understand yet, but because I was upset and 8-year-olds absorb their mother's fear like a sponge. "It's okay, baby," I lied. "Everything's going to be okay." By lunchtime, Jeff's school had called. Could I come in for a meeting? The principal's office felt like a trap. Mrs. Henderson sat behind her desk, her expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Daniel, we need to discuss the attention Jeff has been receiving." My stomach dropped. "What kind of attention?" "Some of the older students have been asking questions, making comments. And this morning there were reporters near the playground." "Are you asking me to withdraw him?" My voice came out flat. No. She leaned forward. "But we want to ensure Jeff's safety and well-being. Perhaps Mr. James's security team could coordinate with our... No, the word came out sharper than I intended. Jeff is a normal kid. He's going to stay a normal kid. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Normal was already gone. You know what nobody tells you about suddenly being connected to wealth? It doesn't feel like winning the lottery. It feels like losing your privacy, your safety, your control. Every decision becomes a calculation. Every outing becomes a risk. Hit that like button if you've ever had your life turned upside down by forces you couldn't control. Because what happened next made everything worse. That afternoon, Jeff came home quiet. Not sad quiet, shut down quiet. How was school? I asked, trying to sound normal. Fine. What did you do at recess? Nothing. He went straight to his room and closed the door. I found him an hour later, sitting on his bed staring at his hands. Baby, what's wrong? Marcus said my dad only wants me because I'm worth money now. His voice was small, broken. He said rich people don't care about regular kids. The rage that flooded through me was instant and blinding. Marcus is wrong, I said, sitting beside him. Your dad loves you, not because of money, because of you. Then why did he leave before I was born? The question hung in the air like smoke. He didn't know about you, remember? If he had... But you knew, Jeff interrupted, looking at me with those gray eyes. You knew and you didn't tell him. Was it because you thought I wasn't worth it? My heart shattered. Jeff, no, never. You were worth everything. Then why didn't you tell him? Tears spilled down his cheeks. Why didn't you want me to have a dad? I couldn't answer him, because the truth, that I was scared, that I was protecting myself, that I made a choice that hurt him, was too much to lay on an 8-year-old's shoulders, so I just held him while he cried. That night, after Jeff finally fell asleep, Christopher showed up unannounced. We need to talk, he said, his jaw tight. We stood on my front steps again, our apparent place for difficult conversations. Jeff got bullied today, I said without preamble, because of you, because of your money and your name, and your world that doesn't fit with ours. I know. He called me. Christopher's voice was strained. He was crying. He asked me if I only wanted him because... He stopped, his hands clenching. I'm handling it. I've already spoken to the school board about anti-bullying protocols. Christopher, you can't solve everything with power and money. Then what do you want me to do? His voice rose. Disappear? Pretend I'm not his father? Go back to not existing? I want you to understand what this costs, I was shouting now. You get to show up and be the hero. I'm the one who kept him from you. I'm the villain in this story, and now the whole world knows it. You're not the villain. Tell that to the comments section. I pulled out my phone, shoving it toward him. They found my social media. Look what they're saying. His face went pale as he scrolled. I didn't need to see the screen. I'd already read them. Gold digger, baby trapper, using her kid to get access to his money. I'll sue them, Christopher said immediately. I'll have my lawyers. You can't sue everyone. My voice cracked. This is what your life is. Scrutiny, judgment, and I can handle it. But Jeff can't. He's 8 years old and kids are telling him he's only valuable because of you. That's not true. But he believes it. Tears were streaming down my face now. And I don't know how to protect him from this, from your world, from the damage, from me, Christopher finished quietly. You want to protect him from me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Maybe, I whispered, maybe I was right to keep you away. Maybe you being in his life causes more harm than good. Christopher's face went white. You don't mean that, don't I? The words were coming from a place of pure fear now. He was happy before, we were fine, and now he's being photographed and bullied and questioning everything about himself. He has a father now, Christopher said, his voice low and dangerous. That's what changed. He has someone who shows up. Who cares? Who brings chaos? I shot back. Who turned our quiet life into a media circus? Who made my son a target? I'm trying. Christopher's control finally snapped. I'm trying to do right by him, by you, by... Then maybe you should try leaving us alone. The words echoed in the cold night air. Christopher stared at me, his face a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Is that really what you want? His voice was barely audible. I opened my mouth, closed it, because I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore except that I was drowning, and I couldn't protect my son, and everything was falling apart. Maybe, and I whispered. From inside the apartment, a small sound, a gasp. We both turned. Jeff stood at the window, his face pressed against the glass, tears streaming down his cheeks. He'd heard everything. Jeff! I started toward the door, but he was already running. I heard his footsteps, heard his bedroom door slam. Jeff! I yanked open the front door, but his bedroom door was locked. Jeff! Baby, open the door! Go away! His voice was broken, sobbing. Just go away! Christopher was right behind me, his face ashen. Jeff! Please! I hate you! Jeff screamed. I hate both of you! I turned to Christopher, my vision blurred with tears. You need to leave. Ruth! Now! Please! For a long moment he just stood there. Then slowly he nodded. As he walked toward the door, he stopped. I'm not giving up on him. I'm not giving up on either of you. Then he was gone, and I was alone with my locked bedroom door and my sobbing son in the wreckage of the life I'd been trying so desperately to protect. I spent 2 hours outside Jeff's locked door, begging, pleading, promising things I didn't know if I could keep. Baby, please, let me explain. Silence. Jeff, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Nothing. At 10:47 p.m., I finally slid down the wall and sat on the floor outside his room, my back against his door, listening to his muffled crying on the other side. This was my fault, all of it. I'd kept Christopher away to protect Jeff from potential pain, and in doing so, I'd guaranteed it. My phone buzzed, a text from Christopher. Is he okay? I stared at the message, typed and deleted 3 responses, finally settled on, he won't talk to me. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, can I try? Every instinct screamed no, to keep him away, to handle this myself the way I'd handled everything for 8 years. But I'd been handling it alone, and I'd failed. Okay, I typed. 20 minutes later, Christopher knocked softly on the apartment door. I let him in without speaking. He looked wrecked, eyes red, hair disheveled, still wearing the same clothes from our argument. His door's locked, I whispered. Christopher nodded. Then he walked down the short hallway and sat on the floor outside Jeff's room, exactly where I'd been sitting. Jeff, his voice was gentle. It's me. Can I talk to you? Silence. You don't have to open the door. You don't have to say anything. I just need you to listen, okay? A long pause, then, so quietly I almost missed it. Okay. Christopher took a deep breath. What you heard tonight, me and your mom fighting, that wasn't your fault. None of this is your fault. You said you wished you never found out about me. Jeff's voice was muffled, broken. No! Christopher's voice cracked. Jeff, no. That's not what I said. I said I wished I'd known about you from the beginning. That's different. That means I wish I'd been there. For everything. Silence. I messed up, Christopher continued. Not just tonight. 9 years ago. I left your mom when I should have stayed. I made work more important than the people I loved. And because of that, I missed 8 years of your life. I missed your first steps, your first words, every birthday, every bedtime story, every soccer game, every moment that made you who you are. His voice was shaking now. I could see his shoulders trembling. And I can't get those years back, Jeff. No matter how much money I have, no matter what I do. Those years are gone. And that's on me. Not your mom, not you, me. The door stayed locked, but I heard movement on the other side. Jeff getting closer, maybe. Listening. Your mom kept me away because she thought I wouldn't want you, Christopher said. And you know what the worst part is? She wasn't completely wrong. I started to protest, but he held up a hand. Not because I wouldn't have loved you, he continued quickly, but because 9 years ago, I was scared. I was 26 and my company was failing, and I didn't know how to be a person, let alone a father. And your mom saw that. She saw that I was drowning, and she made a choice to protect you from that version of me. But you're different now. Jeff's small voice came through the door. I am. because I grew up and I got my life together and I learned what actually matters. But Jeff, Christopher's voice broke completely. I would have grown up faster if I'd known about you. You would have made me better. You would have been the thing that saved me. And your mom took that choice away from both of us because she was scared. This is the moment I'd been terrified of. Christopher speaking truth I couldn't argue with, acknowledging my mistakes while not excusing his own. And the hardest part, knowing Jeff was hearing all of it. Subscribe if you've ever had to face the full weight of your choices, because what happens next, this conversation, it's the kind that either breaks a family apart or builds it back stronger. We both messed up, Christopher said. Your mom and me. We made adult choices that affected you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The lock clicked. Slowly, Jeff's door opened. He stood there in his pajamas, his face red and swollen from crying, clutching the astronomy book Christopher had read to him weeks ago. Are you going to leave again? Jeff asked, his voice barely a whisper. Christopher didn't hesitate. No. But what if it gets hard? What if people keep being mean? What if I'm not leaving? Christopher's voice was firm. I don't care what people say. I don't care how hard it gets. I don't care if it costs me business or reputation or anything else. You are my son, and I'm your father. And that doesn't go away because things get difficult. Promise? Jeff's voice broke. I promise. On everything I have. On everything I am. I'm not going anywhere. Jeff stared at him for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and collapsed into Christopher's arms. And Christopher held him, both of them crying, both of them broken and healing at the same time. I stood at the end of the hallway, tears streaming down my face, watching the two people I loved most piece each other back together. After Jeff fell asleep, in his own bed this time, exhausted from crying, Christopher and I sat in my living room. The silence between us was different now, not hostile, just heavy with everything unsaid. I'm sorry, I said finally, for what I said, for threatening to push you away, for... You were scared, Christopher interrupted gently. I get it. That doesn't make it okay. No, but it makes it human. He looked at me, his eyes tired. I'm scared too, Ruth. Every day. I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, or somehow prove that you were right to keep him from me. You're a good father, I said quietly. Better than I thought you'd be. Better than I let myself hope. Because of you. You raised him. You gave him everything good about himself. We both did. The admission came slowly. He has your curiosity, your focus, your way of seeing patterns in things. Christopher smiled sadly. And your kindness, your resilience, your strength. We sat with that for a moment, the acknowledgement that Jeff was both of us, impossibly woven together. I want to be in his life, Christopher said. Really in it, daily. Not weekend visits or holidays. I want homework and soccer practice and random Tuesdays. I want the boring parts and the hard parts and all of it. That's a lot of time. That's the point. I studied his face, the determination there, the fear, the hope. What about your company? Your life? Jeff is my life now. The company is just what I do. He leaned forward. I'm not asking to replace you or push you out. I'm asking to stand beside you, to co-parent, to be a team. The word team settled over me strangely. For 8 years, there had been no team, just me, alone, making every decision, carrying every burden, celebrating every victory in isolation. I don't know how to share him, I admitted quietly. I don't know how to be a father, Christopher countered, so I guess we figure it out together. Drop a comment and tell me, could you forgive someone who missed 8 years? Could you learn to co-parent with someone you kept at a distance for so long? Because what I'm about to do, opening our life fully to Christopher, it's the scariest thing I've ever done. Okay, I said finally. Christopher's head snapped up. Okay, we try, really try. Not you as the visiting parent, not me as the gatekeeper. Equal partners. For Jeff, Christopher agreed. But I need boundaries, I continued. You don't get to make unilateral decisions. You don't get to use money to override me. And if Jeff is overwhelmed or needs space, you respect that. Deal. And you don't get to freeze me out when things get scary. You don't get to unilaterally decide I'm bad for him. And when I mess up, because I will, you tell me instead of shutting down. I managed a weak smile. Deal. We sat there, two broken people trying to build something functional for the child sleeping down the hall. What do we tell him? I asked. About us. About how this works. The truth, Christopher said, that we're figuring it out, that we both love him, that we're going to try our best. And when people ask if we're together, Christopher's expression flickered, something I couldn't quite read. We tell them we're Jeff's parents. That's all that matters. I nodded, ignoring the small twist in my chest at those words. This wasn't about us. It had never been about us. It was about Jeff. And for him, we'd find a way. As Christopher stood to leave, he paused at the door. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For giving me another chance. For letting me be his father. For, his voice caught, for not giving up on me. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it for him. I know. That's what makes you a great mother. He left before I could respond. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, exhausted. Down the hall, Jeff's door was open slightly. I could see him sleeping, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Tomorrow we'd figure out the logistics, the schedules, the media strategy. Tomorrow we'd start building whatever this co-parenting relationship looked like. But tonight, my son was sleeping peacefully. And for the first time in a month, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. 3 months passed like a slow exhale. Not easy months, not perfect months, but steady ones. Christopher showed up every single day. Tuesday mornings before school, bringing Jeff's favorite blueberry muffins. Thursday afternoons for homework. Saturdays for soccer practice, and Sunday dinners at our kitchen table that still wobbled unless you remembered the folded napkin. He canceled trips, rescheduled meetings, built his entire life around a third grader's schedule. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice. We stopped being 3 separate people trying to fit together. We became something else, a family, not the traditional kind, not the kind from movies or Christmas cards, but the kind built from honesty and effort and showing up even when it's hard. Jeff bloomed under the attention. His teacher called to say his confidence had skyrocketed. His soccer coach commented that he was playing more aggressively, in a good way, taking shots instead of always passing. He's becoming himself, Christopher said one evening, watching Jeff practice dribbling in our apartment complex's small courtyard. He always was himself, I countered gently. I mean the version without fear, without wondering if he's worth showing up for. Christopher's voice was quiet. He knows now that he matters. I wanted to argue that I'd always made Jeff feel he mattered, but Christopher was right. There was a difference between a mother's love and a father's presence. Jeff needed both. The media attention faded gradually. There were still occasional photos, Christopher and Jeff at the ice cream shop, at the park, leaving school, but the headlines shifted from scandalous to human interest. From billionaire secret son to tech CEO embraces fatherhood. Christopher handled it with surprising grace. He released one statement, simple, direct. Jeff is my son. I'm grateful to be his father. Our family asked for privacy as we navigate this together. The word family included me. I noticed that. People stopped asking invasive questions. The school mom stopped whispering. Life normalized into something manageable. And somewhere in the middle of normalizing, I realized something had shifted in me too. For 8 years, I'd been in survival mode. Every decision filtered through. Can we afford this? Is this safe? Will this last? But now with Christopher shouldering half the weight, picking Jeff up when I worked late, handling the school conferences I couldn't make, splitting decisions about everything from dentist appointments to dietary needs, I had space to breathe, space to remember who I was beyond Jeff's mom. You know what happens when you've been in survival mode for so long? You forget you're allowed to rest, to dream, to want things for yourself. I'd spent 8 years making myself smaller so Jeff could have more. And suddenly I had help. I had a partner. Hit that subscribe button if you know what it's like to finally exhale after years of holding your breath. Because what happened next, the way our family kept evolving, it surprised all of us. One Thursday evening in late November, I was making dinner when Christopher's hand brushed mine, reaching for the cutting board. We both froze. It wasn't the first time we touched. There had been plenty of accidental contact, passing Jeff between us, both reaching for his backpack, standing too close in our small kitchen. But this felt different. Christopher's eyes met mine. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something there that wasn't about Jeff or co-parenting or logistics. "Sorry," he said, pulling back. "It's fine." But my heart was racing in a way it hadn't in 9 years. I turned back to the stove, hyper-aware of his presence behind me. The way he moved through my kitchen like he belonged there. The way his laugh sounded when Jeff told a ridiculous joke. The way he'd started bringing me coffee in the mornings. Exactly how I liked it, even though I'd never told him. He just noticed. "Mom!" Jeff's voice broke through my thoughts. "Can Dad stay for dinner?" The casual way he said it, like it was obvious, like it was normal, made my chest tight. "Of course," I said. Christopher stayed, like he had every Thursday for the past month. After dinner, after Jeff went to bed, Christopher lingered at the door like always. "Ruth?" I turned. "Yeah? Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. "I mean, with how things are, with this arrangement. Are you asking if I regret letting you in?" "I guess I am." I studied his face, the uncertainty there, the vulnerability he'd learned to show. "No, I don't regret it. Jeff is happier than I've ever seen him. What about you?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. "I'm good," I said finally. "We're good." He nodded slowly. "Good." But as he left, I caught myself watching him walk down the hallway. Caught myself noticing the way his shoulders had relaxed over the past 3 months. The way he smiled more. The way he'd stopped being Christopher James, CEO, and started just being Christopher, Jeff's dad. And maybe, just maybe, something more. December arrived with its familiar chaos. Christmas decorations appeared overnight. Jeff's school concert was scheduled. The annual neighborhood light tour was coming up. And Jeff was planning something. I could tell by the way he whispered with Christopher when they thought I wasn't listening. The way they exchanged looks across the dinner table. The way Jeff kept asking seemingly random questions about my work schedule in late December. "What are you two plotting?" I asked one evening. "Nothing," Jeff said, his eyes wide with obviously fake innocence. "Absolutely nothing," Christopher agreed, fighting a smile. "You're both terrible liars." "Wonder where he gets that from," Christopher murmured. I threw a dish towel at him. He caught it, laughing. Jeff watched us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something satisfied, something hopeful. Like watching his parents get along was the gift he'd actually wanted all along. 1 week before Christmas, Jeff climbed into bed and asked me to sit with him. "Mom?" "Yeah, baby? Can Dad come for Christmas morning?" My breath caught. "What? For Christmas? Like when we open presents and stuff? Can he be here?" Christmas morning had always been ours, just us, our tradition, our sacred space. But looking at Jeff's hopeful face, I realized it wasn't about protecting our tradition. It was about making a new one. "Of course he can," I said softly. Jeff's smile was brighter than any Christmas light. "Really? Really?" He threw his arms around me. "Thank you. This is going to be the best Christmas ever." As I closed his door, I found Christopher in the hallway. He'd clearly been listening. "You don't have to," he started. "I want to," I interrupted. "Jeff wants you there. So do I." Something shifted in Christopher's expression. "Yeah? Yeah." We stood there in my narrow hallway, the space between us charged with everything unspoken. "Ruth, don't," I said quietly. "Not yet. Let's just get through Christmas as a family, and then we can figure out what comes next." He nodded slowly. "As a family." "As a family," I agreed, and for the first time in 9 years, the word didn't terrify me. It felt like home. Comment below and tell me, when did you realize this family was going to make it? Was it the coffee, the kitchen moment, Jeff's Christmas request? Because I didn't see it coming. This whole time I thought I was just learning to co-parent. Turns out I was learning to trust again. Christmas morning was 1 week away, and for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't facing it alone. Jeff had a father who showed up, who stayed, who proved every single day that he meant his promises. And I had, what? A co-parent, a partner, a friend, maybe something more. But I wasn't ready to name it yet, wasn't ready to risk the fragile peace we'd built. So I focused on Christmas, on Jeff's excitement, on the way Christopher's eyes softened when he looked at our son, on the family we were becoming, one day at a time. Christmas morning arrived with snow. Not the heavy, inconvenient kind that complicated life, the soft, movie-perfect kind that made everything look new. I woke at 6:42 a.m. to the sound of small feet padding down the hallway. Jeff checking if Santa, the real kind, the magic kind, had come. At 6:43, my doorbell rang. Christopher stood in the hallway holding 2 coffees and a bag of fresh croissants, snowflakes melting in his hair. "Merry Christmas," he said softly. "You're early." I couldn't sleep. His smile was nervous, boyish. "Is that okay?" I stepped aside, letting him in. "It's perfect." Jeff appeared in the living room doorway, still in his pajamas, his eyes widening when he saw Christopher. "Dad, you're here!" "Told you I would be, buddy." Jeff launched himself at Christopher, who caught him easily, lifting him off the ground in a hug that made my chest ache in the best way. This was what I'd been afraid of, this exact moment, my son loving someone who might leave. But Christopher was here, at 6:43 on Christmas morning, with coffee and croissants and snowflakes in his hair. He'd shown up, again, like he had every day for 3 months. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for him to disappear. We opened presents slowly, not because we had many. Our budget was still tight. Even with Christopher's quiet offers of help, I'd mostly refused, but because Jeff wanted to savor every moment. He opened his gifts from me first, the telescope he'd been wanting, bought with 3 months of overtime shifts and careful saving. His face lit up like I'd handed him the actual stars. "Mom, this is perfect." "There's a meteor shower next week," I said. "We can watch it together." "All 3 of us?" Jeff looked between Christopher and me hopefully. "All 3 of us," Christopher confirmed. Jeff turned to the gifts under the tree marked "From Dad." A collection of astronomy books, a science kit, a framed photograph of the 3 of us from soccer practice that Christopher had secretly taken. In the photo, Jeff was between us, holding both our hands mid-laugh. We looked like a family. Jeff stared at the photo for a long moment. Then he carefully set it on the end table next to the couch, positioning it just right. "So I can see it every day," he explained. "I have something for you too, Dad," Jeff said quietly. He disappeared into his room and returned carrying something wrapped in newspaper comics. His own wrapping job, careful and imperfect. Christopher took it with trembling hands. "Jeff, you didn't have to." "I wanted to." Christopher unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a construction paper booklet, the kind second graders make in art class. The cover read, "My Dad," in Jeff's careful printing. Christopher opened it. The first page, a drawing of Santa with gray eyes. "This is how I met my dad." The second page, Christopher and Jeff eating ice cream. "My dad listens to me." The third page, them at soccer practice. "My dad comes to my games." Page after page of moments, small moments, ordinary moments, that Jeff had been collecting like treasures. The last page was just words in Jeff's neatest handwriting. My dad didn't know about me, but now he does, and he stayed. That's what makes him my dad. Christopher's hands shook. Tears spilled down his face, unashamed, unchecked. "Jeff," he managed, his voice breaking. "This is the best gift I've ever received." "Better than a company?" Christopher pulled Jeff into his arms. "Better than anything." This is what showing up looks like. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but being remembered, being counted, being drawn into a child's story not as an obligation, but as a choice, as love. Subscribe if you believe that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. because what I realized in that moment changed everything. I watched them, father and son, holding each other, crying together, and something inside me finally let go. The fear I'd been carrying for 9 years, the certainty that love meant loss, the belief that I had to protect us from hope because hope led to heartbreak. Christopher had proven me wrong, not with money or power or grand declarations, but with Tuesday mornings and homework help and showing up at 6:43 a.m. on Christmas with coffee and snowflakes in his hair. He'd become what I'd been too afraid to believe he could be, a father, and maybe, if I was brave enough to admit it, something more to me. After Jeff got distracted setting up his telescope, Christopher found me in the kitchen. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For this. For letting me be here. For giving me a chance to be his father." He paused. "For giving me a chance to prove I've changed." "You didn't just change," I said softly. "You grew up. We both did." "Ruth." The way he said my name made my heart stutter. "I know we're taking this slow. I know we're focused on Jeff. But I need you to know, Christopher, just let me say this." He stepped closer. "What we're building here, it's not just about co-parenting, not for me. It hasn't been for a while." My breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I see you, not just as Jeff's mom, as Ruth, the woman who worked doubles to buy her son a telescope, who protected him fiercely even when it cost her everything, who gave me a second chance I didn't deserve." His voice dropped. "I'm saying that somewhere between Tuesday morning muffins and Christmas morning coffee, I fell for you again. And this time, I'm not leaving." The words hung between us, terrifying and perfect. "I'm not ready," I whispered. "Not yet. I need to trust this. To trust us." "I know." He smiled gently. "I'm not asking you to be ready. I'm just telling you I'll be here when you are, however long that takes." Comment and tell me, do you believe in second chances? In people who leave coming back different? Because I spent 8 years believing the answer was no. And maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. That afternoon, we walked to the park, all three of us, to try out Jeff's telescope, even though it was still light out. Jeff ran ahead, too excited to wait, leaving Christopher and me walking side by side. "I thought about this moment," Christopher said quietly. "Last year, sitting in my office on Christmas Day, working because I had nothing else to do. I thought, this is it. This is what success looks like. Fancy office, empty apartment, no one waiting for me. And now I know what success actually looks like." He gestured ahead where Jeff was setting up the telescope with intense concentration. "It looks like that, like being needed, like showing up, like being chosen." I slipped my hand into his. He looked down in surprise. "I'm not ready for everything," I said, "but I'm ready for this." His fingers tightened around mine. "This is enough." We walked like that to the park, our hands linked, Jeff laughing ahead of us. Christmas snow falling soft and quiet. That night, after Jeff fell asleep clutching his astronomy books, after Christopher left with a promise to return tomorrow, I sat in my living room looking at the framed photograph on the end table, the three of us, laughing together. Outside, snow was falling again, just like it had that December afternoon when I'd taken Jeff to meet Santa, when our secret had exploded under Christmas lights and the smell of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts. I'd thought that day would destroy us. Instead, it saved us. Because for 8 years, I thought I'd lost something when Christopher walked away. I thought I'd buried my chance at a complete family under silence and secrets and fear. But I hadn't lost anything. I'd survived. I'd built a life. I'd raised an extraordinary human being who knew how to love fiercely and forgive completely. And when the past came back, when Christopher sat on that Santa throne and our secrets exploded into truth, we didn't shatter. We rebuilt. Not into what we were, into something better. A family built not on perfection, but on presence. Not on erasing mistakes, but on showing up anyway. Not on grand gestures, but on Tuesday mornings and homework help and being there when it mattered. I walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cold glass, watching the snow fall the way it had that afternoon at the fair. The same snow, a different family. My phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. Thank you for today, for everything. See you tomorrow. I smiled, the smell of cinnamon from tonight's Christmas cookies still lingering in the air. The ones Jeff and Christopher had made together while I pretended not to watch them from the kitchen doorway. The same scent as that December fair. But this time, it smelled like home. From his room, I heard Jeff's sleepy voice. Mom? Yeah, baby? Do you think Dad's happy? I thought about Christopher's face tonight, the way he'd looked at Jeff like he was the answer to every question he'd forgotten to ask. The way he'd looked at me like, maybe, just maybe, we were becoming something neither of us expected. Yeah, sweetheart, I said, my voice steady with certainty. I think he finally is. Jeff's voice came softer now, already drifting towards sleep. Me too, Mom. Me too. Outside, snow continued to fall, and inside we were building something that couldn't be broken by time or distance or mistakes made in the past. We were building a family, one day, one choice, one moment of showing up at a time. If this story reminded you that families aren't found, they're built, one choice at a time, leave a comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about imperfect people choosing to show up anyway. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Show up, try again, choose love, even when we're scared, especially when we're scared.